Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live webinar session. I'm Meredith Grace, the facilitator of today's event, and as such, I'd like to cover a few details before we get started. 2020 has undoubtedly presented many challenges for business and finance in particular, causing disruption, putting some initiatives on hold indefinitely. But if there's one item that has been pressured into the spotlight by the pandemic, it's automation. Our experts will speak more on that in just a bit, but first, some housekeeping details. This is a 45-minute session during which all attendees are in listen-only mode, but are encouraged to participate by submitting questions and feedback using the questions panel on your screen. This webcast will be recorded and made available to all registrants after the session ends. So let me introduce our expert speakers today. We have Bob Cohen and Daniel Saraste. Bob leads Arden Partners coverage of accounts payable, business networks, and travel and expense management. He brings more than 15 years of experience helping enterprises transform their source-to-pay operations. Daniel Saraste is Medius's Senior Vice President of Product Strategy, bringing 14 years of experience in the P2P tech space. His real-world functionality approach to solutions gives him a unique vantage point into the technologies available today and how to embark on a successful journey of digital transformation. So I'd say we're in pretty good hands. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Bob Cohen to kick off our presentation today. Bob?
Great. Thank you, Meredith. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find this presentation informational and worthwhile, and we're looking forward to it. So let's get started here. So we're going to talk about the new reality that exists in AP. Meredith touched on that. As we've all heard time and time again over the past number of months, nothing is as it was. So we're going to talk about what those changes look like and how they've impacted AP. We'll take a look at the results of the State of ePayables market research survey that Arden completed earlier this year, so it has some valuable information and some good insights into what's going on and what things we need to focus on. We'll take a look at what best-in-class organizations are doing in order to lead the way and how they achieve better results, and hopefully provide you with some insight and into what they do differently and what you can do in order to improve results and to achieve best-in-class results yourself. And then finally, we'll take a look at why you need AP automation in 2021 in order to get that, how to get started now, and is it a reality if we start now to get this, really in place before January begins? We'll talk to Daniel about that a little bit, but I think the answer you'll find is yes. If you act now, we can get you on the road to automation and help you improve some of the challenges that you're facing and really put your organization in a better position going forward to tackle whatever is ahead of us. And then if we have time, we'll get to Q&A. So a little bit about Arden Partners for those of you that may not be familiar with it. Arden Partners is a Boston-based research and advisory firm that's laser focused on supply management and source-to-pay processes, which include AP, B2B payments, procurement, and the contingent workforce. We advise clients and publish research that helps business decision makers understand industry best practices and how to improve performance. We also publish research that covers the technology landscape that helps professionals like yourself listening in identify the best fit solutions for their budget and their needs. On the screen here, we just some of the different works that Arden provides here. If you're not familiar with Payables Place, it's a website that's dedicated specifically to the AP community here, and it's a great source of information. We also have CPO Rising, which is the #1 trafficked procurement-related site in North America. As you can see here, we do technology research. We recently, in 2019, covered players in the e-payable space. We this year released a B2B payments technology landscape, which talked about the different requirements for organizations looking to implement B2B payments and some of the key providers in that space. And the subject of today's research here, the State of ePayables 2020 research. So let's kind of get into that here. So this is the 15th annual report on the State of ePayables. It's something that we started many years ago, and over the years we've collected tens of thousands of data points from thousands of organizations out there, just like yourself, small, medium, and large, mostly in North America, about 25% in EMEA, and some in Asia Pac as well. But really, it provides us with an insight over the years as to what's going on in AP. And we also have been able to track trends, things such as the cost to process an invoice and how that's changed from year to year, key challenges and opportunities and skill sets that organizations are tackling in their everyday life, and also, the perception of AP. So we'll get into that. This year we had a little over 200 respondents to the survey. It's a web-based survey. In addition to that, we also reach out to some of the respondents and talk to them, and some of their quotes and insights are included in the report and also included in the presentation that we'll see here today. So you can see that the report comes from folks in the industry like yourself. 71% come from AP, 18% in finance and treasury, 9% in procurement, and P2P. So really, it's a good sampling. We're not talking to people who don't know anything about AP. These are people that live and breathe in AP every single day. It's a good mix between management and workers. So we have directors and VPs. We also have the staff level folks that actually do the work on a day-to-day basis. The organizations are split pretty evenly between small, medium, and large here, as you can see on the screen there. And as I mentioned, about 70% of respondents are in North America, 25% or so EMEA, and then a splattering in Asia Pac as well. So a good sampling. So enough about that. Let's get into AP's new reality there. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted enterprises all over the world, leaving many scrambling to adapt and overcome. No one was spared, but some were better prepared than others. Let's take a look. So what we've seen is that the reality is more staff are now working remotely from home than at any point in the past. And what we've also seen and heard from talking to practitioners is that this is something that may not change anytime soon, or may in fact be the new way forward. So, why is this important? Because AP needs to provide the tools to support this hybrid model. It's a totally different situation when everybody's working in the same office and you can route invoices around for approval when everyone's within the same walls. But when everyone's dispersed across the country or the city or whatever it may be, it presents really lots of new challenges. Any organization that was dealing with paper before the pandemic just realized that paper became a whole lot more difficult and more challenging, and it's a bigger problem than ever before. As I mentioned, if everybody's in the same office, if you're doing a paper-based process, while it was inefficient and costly and time-consuming, you theoretically could take that invoice and pass it around from office to office to whoever needed to approve that invoice. When everyone's working at home, that's not possible anymore. So that paper problem that we had before just became a whole lot more serious. Cash flow and payment terms came into focus more so than ever. We were kind of cruising along there, if you will, but all of a sudden, with the changes in supply chains, the changes in demand, cash flow and payment terms became much more front and center. The C-suite became much more interested in what was going on. We'll talk about that in a little bit later on there. And one thing else we've heard is supply chains are all over the news and have been for the past 6 months. We all know the impact to consumer goods and durables, whether it was toilet paper or paper towels or cleansing wipes. Everyone talked about supply chain, whereas before no one really knew what the supply chain was or really didn't care about it. Now they understand some of the implications of what happens when suppliers can't meet demand. And so that's something else that is a new reality for AP. So it's much more front and center. With everything else going on, organizations are demanding better visibility. Executives want to know what's going on, how much money do they have on hand, which suppliers are we doing most of our business with, which ones are at risk. Just the demand for visibility and understanding the supply chain has increased by orders of magnitude. And then finally, as we'll see throughout this and this presentation, some of the data that we're going to show here, the impact of automation is clearly visible. There's a clear distinction between those that have it and those that don't, those that were prepared for any eventuality and those that weren't. So let's get to this right now. So I mentioned One of the questions we asked, and the timing of the survey that we did was actually quite fortuitous, is that we started the survey in April when the pandemic was really just kind of impacting most of North America and the US specifically. So we wanted to understand um, the impact while everyone was under quarantine. We wanted to find out how the pandemic was impacting business in general and AP specifically. The results, not surprisingly, are quite telling, as you might expect. Every business was impacted. 58% reported a extraordinary or significant impact. But what was interesting was that 42%, the remaining there, said the impact was only moderate. Why was there a difference there? For many times this had to deal with the levels of automation and also the industries that these businesses were in. As we know, the pandemic certainly has picked winners and losers when it comes to business performance. Winners are technology, streaming services. The ones that have been more severely impacted and challenges are things in hospitality, in travel, in restaurants, in box store retailers. So it's kind of interesting to see, but the pandemic has, what we notice is definitely picked winners and losers here. So when a crisis hits, the first instinct of many CFOs is to conserve cash on the balance sheet. And the first idea on how to do this is to extend payment terms. But this may have the net effect of magnifying the impact on suppliers and your supply chain's long-term viability. More than half of the respondents in our survey indicated that COVID-19 related events caused them to change how and when they pay their suppliers. Daniel, I wanted to bring you on here. If you could talk to me a little about some of the implications of changing the payment terms that organizations put into place, and also what did you see with the prospects and clients that you're talking to on a regular basis?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Um, I couldn't agree more with what you've said about how the increased attention on AP, the AP process, and the control and visibility. I hear from our clients that this is a board level um, issue they're talking about, and it's putting a lot more requirement on CFOs, trickling down to VP of Finance, trickling down to AP, and no longer is it okay to say, we think we're going to be here with cash the next month or in 2 months, but they want weekly updates on where are we, what does the forecast look like, or how sure are you of these numbers, what are you doing to improve this. So that's one thing, the very high attention to these things, and it's um, absolutely what you say. There are winners and losers in terms of industry, but also in terms of automation. That some of these companies coming to us now looking to automate, they say there's no way we can do this. There's no way we can do this forecasting. We need to automate now. Whereas we see that our customers, we're so happy to see some of them going out and on LinkedIn and social media writing about how happy they are that they've automated AP, because now they're in a position where they can actually deal with this. So it's night and day. If you're in a paper-based process and trying to do this, good luck. Well, if you are, you know what we're talking about probably. And if you're not, then well, lucky you, or congratulations. I mean, it's you need to be automated to be able to do that kind of forecasting every week, accurate numbers, and also to be able to effectively what you said, Bob, that some of these suppliers you don't want to pay late. Maybe you want to increase your cash position by paying later, but maybe not all your suppliers. You need to be effectively segmenting your supply base and create payment strategies per segment and say, these guys we can pay a little bit late, but these guys we have to make sure they survive, because without them we don't survive.
That's a great point, Daniel. When talking about segmenting your supplier base, and one size doesn't fit all, your knee-jerk reaction of the CFO, maybe let's hold on to cash, let's extend payment terms or go to full term. But as you dive deeper into your supply chain, you realize that some of your suppliers, potentially the smaller ones that are critical to your organization, they may need that infusion of cash on a regular basis. And if you extend terms out, you might impact their ability to actually provide you with the goods and services that you need. So while you may be able to pay a larger supplier at term or extend terms out with them potentially, those smaller suppliers are going to be severely impacted. And if you're short-sighted, in that strategy and don't segment your supplier base, you may have a negative effect of, the law of unintended consequences. By extending payment terms, you've now impacted your supply chain and your own ability, your own organization's ability to produce the goods and services that you need. So that's a great point when it comes to segmenting your supplier base, and one size doesn't fit all. So, and we're going to talk about, the title of this webinar is, why you need to automate now. Daniel brings up one very strong point there. When that C-suite, that CFO, that controller comes to you and needs that increased visibility into the cash flow and managing your cash, if you have to do that in a paper-based process, you're going to be in trouble. And so the good news is, as we'll talk about a little bit later on, that doesn't have to be the case. There's ways to automate. So this is a very interesting slide. So, what we saw, we asked how well organizations were prepared when the pandemic hit. On the left-hand side here, we can see organizations that really faced some severe challenges. The working from home restrictions resulted in delayed payments to vendors, delayed approval of invoices, their ability to get invoices routed around. Before, as I mentioned, if everyone's in the office, they could pass the paper around, use inter-office mail, whatever it is. But when you're working remotely, that's not so easy. There's a story of one AP manager who I talked to, who, in order to print checks, had to actually print them at home, put them on her front porch. Her controller came over, excuse me, the CFO came over, and the CFO signed all the checks sitting on her AP manager's porch. When she was done signing all the checks, she went home. The AP manager came out, took all the checks back in, put them in envelopes, and then went to the mailbox, the post office, to mail these. That is just not a viable long-term solution. And definitely talked about those that were more unprepared for the pandemic to hit. If we look on the right side of the screen here, there in green, there were many organizations that were ready and able to transition and really didn't have much of an impact going forward. It may have taken a day or two or three to get up to speed, and for some, not even that long. And the reason being is that they had plans in place. Many of them had disaster recovery plans. They had contingency plans. I've talked to a number of organizations that fall into the category on the right that actually had their workers either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis work from home, just to make sure that things worked properly in the event of a situation that would occur. And so those that were more prepared faced very little, if any, impact. And so, the question is, what was the difference between these two groups? In a word, it was automation. Those that had automated their AP processes were better prepared for the uncertainties that came, in February and March timeframe. Those that were paper-based weren't. Daniel, bring you back on here. Is this consistent with what you've seen and what you've heard talking to prospects and customers?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the paper-based process was kind of a guilty conscience you could get away with before the pandemic, but when it hit the fan, it became pretty evident that it just doesn't work. And like you say, the guy on the porch, well, good for him, but what if it rains, right? It's not a sustainable process. And just being able to work remotely, not only approvers, but your whole finance department being able to do their job remotely takes all the stress out of that process. So I mean, that's been the case for so long, but still a lot of organizations have not. I don't know. I think they've been kind of thinking that, well, we're fine. We can do this for a little bit longer. We don't have to do this now. But of course, that's been kind of that's not the case anymore. That's you really have to do something about this.
Yeah, exactly. If nothing else, the problem with paper has always been, visible, but people have figured out ways around it and kind of dealt with the inefficiencies of this.
Yeah.
However, recent events have shown us, the errors of our ways here, and really the challenges that, that are brought on by doing manual paper-based time-consuming processes. And who would have ever thought, if you asked a year ago or 2 years ago, if you had to pick a list of essential workers in an economy, would AP be considered an essential worker? And that's
Right.
exactly what's happened there. I mean, AP workers were essential workers. I've talked to many organizations that weren't automated, that AP folks, rather than being able to work at home because they had technology in place, had to go to the office. And why'd they have to go to the office? Very simple, because the mail was still going to their office location. Someone needed to get the mail, sort the mail, open the mail, take out not only the invoice, but also the checks, the paper checks that they were receiving. And then once they did that, what did they do then? They had to scan the checks in so they could be deposited in a bank. And with the paper invoices that were coming in, they needed to typically manually enter those and then figure out how to get them approved with everybody dispersed. And then when it came to payments, the same exact thing. You know, the example I gave of the AP manager and CFO meeting on the porch. They happened to be fortunate enough to live in the same neighborhood where the CFO could walk over to the AP manager's porch and sign all the checks that needed to get done. But you know, it's kind of like everyone knows that the process has been inefficient. This has brought it to light, and I think it's a double-edged sword, if you will. You know, the challenges that have been brought front and center are actually an opportunity for AP to get the process automated now, because it's front and center on everybody's mind, and they see the challenges and inefficiencies of paper and manual processing. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but really, the pandemic brought this all front and center to the C-suite, and they understand now the challenges of not being automated and the pitfalls of that. So let's now take a look at some more of the survey results here, going forward here. Perception is reality, and the perception of the AP department for is up now for the past couple of years. So this year, 60% of respondents said that AP is viewed either exceptionally valuable or very valuable to the organization. This is up 4% from our previous year study. And you know, this is a very positive indicator. We take this to mean that AP is finally kind of moving from that back office to the front office, that people understand what value AP brings to the organization, and they're starting to appreciate that more and more. So, Daniel, kind of what I touched on before, if perception is that of APs at its highest level that we've ever seen when we've done this survey, is now a good time to go to the executive suite to try to get an automation project approved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the reasons why paper-based processes are still around is because the people in AP are doing such a good job. You know, they've been struggling with this process, and they've been, they've been nagging approvers out there who are not doing their job, so they can't pay invoices in time, and they've been really putting the effort in to make this horrible process work, even though they have no system support. But I think that's what's changed. But I really think that's why a lot of organizations haven't automated it, because these people are doing such a great job that the process actually works, although it shouldn't. But now it's kind of evident that it doesn't work, and I think now there's never been a better time than now to go to senior management and say, guys, um, this was horrible. Do you want to do this again, or should we do something differently? The pandemic is not over, but if you don't automate, you're probably going to be here again pretty soon. So it's really good. I mean, it's a burning platform that you can use to drive that change that you wanted to do for such a long time.
Completely agree. You know, when perception is up and the challenges are visible, has never been a better time to go to that C-suite and have them really appreciate the value that AP can bring to the organization.
Exactly, because it's not that they don't understand. That's not why you haven't been able to get this project through. It's just that there's always a project, or three, or five, or eight competing for budget and attention. And right now, the attention is on this, so it's a perfect time to get it done.
Completely agree. So year in and year out, we do this survey, and while things are moving in the right direction, they're not moving nearly quick enough. The respondents reported that just about half of the invoices they receive are still in paper format, which is incredulous, given where we are in this day and age, but that's the fact. I mean, these numbers have held steady year after year for the most part. Daniel, talk to me a little bit. Why do you think we still have so much paper in the process?
I it is mind blowing. But again, I think it's because people have been dealing with it. They've been told to deal with it and they're dealing with it. But we have seen something pretty amazing during this year that we advised our customers in the beginning of the year, or when the pandemic started erupting, we advised our customers that this is a good time for you to talk to your suppliers about not sending you paper invoices. And a lot of our customers did that with the message that, hey, we're going to be working remotely. If you keep sending us paper, we're not going to pay your invoices. So at least just email a PDF. That's the smallest step. And surprise, they were all able to do that. You know, all ERP systems today, the systems that your suppliers are using to send their invoices, they don't have to print them. They can email those as PDF documents. So if you have a lot of small mom and pop suppliers, there are other options. There are supplier portals where they can key in stuff or upload stuff, or you know, but all the technology is there and all the suppliers have access to it. So there's really no reason to send paper. But the reason people receive paper is because they haven't even talked to their suppliers about that. They haven't even asked them to do so. But with this burning platform, we've seen a really big change, a really fast change, where a lot of paper invoices have been converted to PDF or XML invoices now.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that next year when we do this survey and look at the results, that this number increases significantly because, as you said, um, many organizations didn't even bother to ask their suppliers before because they just dealt with the paper. But
Yeah,
now there's a real burning platform, as you said, to make a change. And I talked to a director of AP for a large organization in New York City, and they had a fair percentage of their suppliers that were still submitting paper invoices to them. When the pandemic hit, they put a message out to all their suppliers and saying, we're not able to go to our office in New York City. Our workers are not going to come from New York and Connecticut and Long Island to come to the office to pick up invoices. That is not going to happen. So if you want to get paid, you need to submit electronically. And as Daniel said, they gave them a number of options in order to do this. And what they were able to achieve was, pretty remarkable, but not surprising because people want to get paid and they understood what was going on. They're now at 99% of suppliers submitting invoices electronically. So we're hopeful that this will not be an outlier, but will really be more indicative of what we see overall. And the reason why we're so bullish on getting rid of paper is because it's just so inefficient and slows down the entire process, as we'll see here coming up. So, hand in hand with paper invoices is the other end of the process, which is payments made electronically. This statistic is a little bit better. We're almost at 60%. We're at 57%. This number has gone up slightly as well over the past couple of years. But once again, we're hopeful that given all that's going on, that people will start using B2B payments electronically as opposed to the physical checks. In North America, Americans love paper checks, and one survey from the federal government that I saw showed that there were 16 billion paper checks printed last year and mailed. I mean, just think about that, 16 billion. That's a lot of paper. It's very
that is a
inefficient.
lot of checks.
And some people are reticent about switching to electronic checks who think they're going to lose the float. That's not the case. You're going to gain much more than anything that you lose when you do this, and it's a much more efficient process. So let's keep going here for the sake of time here. So we asked about top challenges here. Visibility was number one. The other four were all about automation and eliminating paper. So not surprising from what we've just seen here, people in AP in this day and age are still struggling with manual, error-prone, labor-intensive tasks here. So if you're listening in, take a look at this and, Does this match up with what the challenges that you're facing there? Because typically, this is what we see when people are in a paper-laden environment there, that it's just an inefficient process overall. So then next we asked, okay, given what we know, what are your priorities going forward in 2020, excuse me. And now mind you, this also takes into account that this was right during the midst of the pandemic. We're asking people, so the results are probably slightly different than we might have seen otherwise, but we're encouraged that the number one response as far as their chief priority was to improve the visibility and access to the information. They needed better reporting, better data analytics. Daniel mentioned this up front. When your CFO comes to you and wants a report, if you say, yeah, it's going to take me a week or two to get all that information, that's not a good answer and a good position to be in. So organizations realize that they need to have better access to the data, better visibility, because organizations survive on knowledge and understanding their cash flow and their business, and you really can't do that terribly effectively in a manual process here. We can see that the responses after that are still all manual. So the good news is number one response was more strategic. The other four were more manual in nature. And while this might be viewed as negative, the good news is that people realize it's a challenge and they need to get rid of the paper, so we're encouraged by that. Hand in hand with that, we talked about B2B challenges, and optimizing cash flow and understanding business then is much more difficult if the processes are manual, paper-based, and you lack visibility into the AP and B2B payment areas. So this is in sync with what we've seen in the rest of the process, and we're not surprised about this. Hopefully next year, the challenges will be a little bit more strategic in nature in trying to provide more information to their organization as opposed to just dealing with the manual processes. Daniel, when you're talking to your clients who have automated as well as your prospects who haven't, are these challenges kind of resemble what you're hearing out there?
Absolutely. Of course, it differs a little bit between, depending on what industry they're in and how big you are as an organization and what role you play in your supply chain. I mean, some companies have more cash and they're absolutely more interested in, I want to maximize the amount of early payment discounts that I can capture because I have cash and I want to leverage that, but I'm simply not able to run my AP process fast enough to be able to do that. But for most companies this year, it's more of a survival mode, right? And then these are the typical challenges that we see, and as you say, they're all related to that paper-based process. And if you if you automate and you get that kind of control, so you can decide whom do I want to pay when. It's not as blunt as just wanting to be able to pay on time or wanting to pay late or wanting to pay early, but you can kind of get your head above the surface and take a breath and start thinking about how do you actually want to do this when you're in control.
Yeah, and you think about you look at it very simplistically. That's just a paper check, and I'm just writing this, but what you need to take kind of a step back and realize that you're controlling the cash flow out of your organization. And typically AP is probably the largest or second largest outflow of cash in an organization. And so you need to manage that more effectively. If you're not doing this in AP, you should start thinking about how can we add more value to the organization. There's opportunities with paying suppliers electronically to actually earn rebates if you're using virtual cards, to earn rebates or to increase the return on your capital if you're taking advantage of some early payment discounts. But in order to do that, the rest of the process needs to be automated so that you're in a position where you can decide and be proactive. Do we want to pay this invoice early, or do we want to pay this invoice on time, or do we want to pay this late? What makes the most sense for the organization? Because if you're in a manual process and you're struggling just to get invoices approved within the payment terms, you're behind the eight ball and you're missing out a huge opportunity. So while you were talking, Daniel, you kind of led us right into the next slide here, the kind of the B2B payment strategies in action here. And this is what your brethren are doing out there when it comes to payments. many organizations in this, 52% here say they're paying invoices when they're due or payments are late. And if you think about what we had on that earlier slide where 53% changed their payment terms, there might be a correlation between these two, because I mentioned the first knee-jerk reaction of many CFOs and many organizations when crisis hits is to hold on to the cash. And number one would definitely indicate that as much. So just kind of understanding where you are and the different strategies that are available to you, and the different strategies that AP organizations across the world are leveraging at this point in time. So, this is one of my favorite slides in the survey. I just want to understand. It gives me a good, insight into where AP is thinking and what their future looks like. And I'm encouraged by the results here, because 92% replied that AP needs to have a customer service mentality. And that's encouraging to me, because they realize that they're really a shared service center for the rest of the organization, and that the rest of the organization needs and benefits from the information that AP can provide to them. So whether they're viewing themselves as providing customer service and need to do a better job, that's actually very encouraging to me. As is number two, where AP is no longer just thinking about what does AP do and how are we in our own little portion of the organization. They're thinking larger and saying, how does AP relate to the entire P2P process? Why is that important? Because as we all know, AP is not isolated. It's actually closely connected to the upstream procurement and sourcing part of the business there as well. So it's good that the AP staff is thinking a little bit more strategically as to their role in the organization and how they fit in. And then, fraud and compliance is something that's on the huge upswing right now. It's always a problem, but when crises hit, one thing that we've learned and we've seen is that the fraudsters, see this as an opportunity. I talked to one assistant controller recently who told me about a situation where there was an attempted fraud against their organization. They had, they received an email with an invoice attached to it, and then shortly thereafter, they received an email from their CFO, or looking like their CFO, saying, "Hey, I just submitted an invoice to you. Can you pay this?" Well, the controller was on top of their AP process and knew nothing about this new supplier, and knew that it was very irregular that their CFO would actually send an email to pay an invoice in that manner. And so what they did was they called the CFO up and asked the question, "Did you just send an email?" And the CFO had no idea what they were talking about. And they said, "Okay." So they didn't pay it, and then they investigated the email that looked like it came from the CFO, and it was actually a phishing scam. So the CFO's name was masked on the email. So it looked like it was coming from John, but it wasn't coming from John. It was actually coming from a scammer somewhere. So it's something that is on the upswing. We hear about it every day, and I'm sure Daniel hears about it from his clients and his prospects. But the good news is, when you have automation in place, you can detect, you can mitigate these, and you can prevent fraud from happening significantly. So,
Absolutely. You do not want to drive your approvals through email. That's it, just opening the door for that type of scam. And like you said, it's becoming very common, and they're very sophisticated. And it really does look like an authentic email thread. There's usually quite a bit of history with an email ping-ponging back and forth between different stakeholders internally, and they do their research, they check out people's roles and relationships on LinkedIn, so it looks very authentic. So yeah, don't use email for approvals.
no, and if you're doing a manual process, it's much more difficult to detect this. However, if you're using automation for AP, there's rules that you can put in place for paying invoices, for urgent requests, for
Absolutely.
detecting and mitigating fraud. So it's hard to put a hard dollar number or on preventing fraud, because nobody reports how many fraud attempts against their organization they received, or how much money they may have lost paid to unscrupulous suppliers. But when you're looking to automate AP, and when you're looking to get this case approved and approved now, you talk to that CFO and say, "Listen, this system can help us prevent losing money and being, in the news somewhere for paying fraudulent suppliers. So it's one of those intangible benefits that has a very tangible and discernible benefit to the organization.
Yeah, I usually say it's like wearing a seatbelt, right? Because you don't know. Hopefully, you won't have an accident, but if you're not wearing your seatbelt and you do have an accident, the outcome is not pretty.
Yeah, no, it's a great example there. Wear your seatbelts, folks. So let's take a look at the best in class. What we're seeing on the screen are the core metrics that matter and the ones that should be at the foundation of every AP department's ongoing measurements and tracking processes. The positive news is that in general, we continue to see improvement year over year, but there's still much work that needs to be done. What's obvious from the data that we see on the screen in front of us is that best-in-class organizations are able to do things faster, better, and cheaper than everyone else, clearly showing the value of leveraging automation and accounts payable. Daniel, what jumps out on the screen to you?
Well, no, I would say that these benchmarks they're very much in line with the benchmarking that we do. Based on the data through our platform, we can see similar numbers of the type of improvements that customers can do, and the range of performance is striking. I mean, if you look at the cost varying between 256 up to $12, and I've seen worse than $12 as well. And sometimes when you discuss this with customers and really make them understand the cost of their current process, they have a hard time understanding how much money they're spending on each invoice. And building that business case together can really open their eyes basically to how much money and time they're spending for no reason in this process. And of course that trickles down to all the other KPIs here as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's many KPIs. These are just the core ones that we suggest. And just one quick point of clarification. At Arden, we define the best in class as the top 20% of all respondents in our survey. And that's the average of those. So the 256, there's some that are doing it for 90 cents or 80 cents and some that are $3. And same thing to your point there with the cost to process a single invoice. That's an average. So some might be doing it for $20 and some might be doing it for less. Just for the sake of time, we're going to keep moving here. So our data clearly shows that best-in-class organizations have automated core AP processes at a much higher rate than everybody else. You can see on the screen here on the green bars how much different this is. And the reason why this is important, because if you look back at the previous slide, it really pays off at the end of the day. So once again, hammering home the point here, best-in-class technology, best-in-class differentiators is clearly technology and automation. You can see how much more technology is being used by the best-in-class organizations in our survey, and the results, bear this out. Technology helps do things, process invoices less expensively, faster, with less exceptions. And why is this important? Because time is money. And if you can approve an invoice in 2 days, then a whole world of opportunity opens up to you. And actually that invoice, which is a liability to you when it comes in because you owe money for it, when you have it approved and ready to pay, it actually becomes an asset to your organization for the remainder of time before it's due. And how is that? Because you can go back to a supplier and say, if we want to pay you early, there's a discount. The standard terms might be 210 net 30. So if you can approve an invoice in 2 days and take that 2% discount, that amounts to about a 36% return on your capital there. So it's a huge opportunity for you. So this is why we're so bullish about automating accounts payable. So right up front, we talked about why automate now. Daniel and I touched on this throughout the entire time. The value of automating AP has always been pretty straightforward and obvious to us in AP, but to those outside of it, they saw the value, but maybe not as much as the danger and risks of not automating. And as Daniel said, AP's tried to automate in the past sometimes, and they've had to compete against other projects, and it was always a little bit of a challenge. What the pandemic has provided us with is a huge opportunity in order to justify AP automation now and do it today and not wait until January, not wait until next year, to start the process now and get the ball rolling. Before organizations took a look at the items on the left and talked about lowering processing time and shortening cycle things, all those key metrics. And those are critically important, but they may not have resonated as well with the C-suite as what's going on today because of the increased visibility and the stark awareness of what work from home challenges and paper processes really mean, and it can impact their organization. So when you're justifying a project, it's still critically important that we talk about all the things on the left, but also on the right. It's how do you ensure business continuity? How do you make sure that our business can continue to function? How do we build resilience so that when something else occurs, we're in a position to handle it and handle it smoothly? And then finally, take a look at cash management. Daniel and I have talked about this through the entire presentation there. AP manages cash. It may not be viewed that way in your organization, but the more effectively and efficiently you manage cash, the better it is for your organization, and the better your organization is in a position to survive and thrive going forward. So why automate now? We've talked about this a number of times. It's front and center. The pitfalls of paper-based manual processes are clearly visible to everybody in the organization. And we all heard the saying, strike while the iron hot. Well, the iron is hot right now, and there's never been a better time to gain executive buy-in to help automate accounts payable than right now. So great, you want to automate? What are some of the key strategies that you need to leverage in order to do this? So digital transformation is no longer a buzzword. It's actually critical to survive. And everything that we've seen over the past 6 months has proved that. If you're manual, you are, severely challenged. If you're automated, you're much better. So digital transformation is no longer a nice to have. It's really vital to survive and help your organization. And you may have been able to, overcome it this time, and you may be able to, get your invoices processed. And I imagine you would, because most of us are pretty crafty and resilient, but it's not efficient. So you're doing things, but you're not doing things well, and you're not helping your organization, grow and be as efficient as they can. You need to leverage this when you're talking about automating your processes and getting that project approved. We want to accelerate the automation efforts. You may have automated a bits or piece of the process, but if you take a look back at what best in class did and the different processes there's benefits to automating the full AP process there, and even further than that, the full P2P process that's there, and the benefits are, clearly obvious from that. Cash management, one of the challenges that AP projects had getting approved in years past was we talked about tactical things and things that were important to AP and not things that were important to the C-suite, the person that was approving or the people approving the project. What do they care about in the C-suite? It's about perception of their organization. It's about their ability to produce goods and services. It's about their ability to manage cash efficiently, to, if you can save money, every dollar you save helps increase profitability significantly. And so it's just talking about how to impact APs, or how to impact cash management and cash flow, and how AP can impact this by leveraging automation is critical to achieving success now there. We've talked about data and intelligence. More and more organizations want that visibility or demanding that visibility. And so in order for AP to move from that back office to the front office and to help get these projects approved, you need to be better providers of information to the organization. It's not just how and when we pay things, but the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of wealth and valuable information that can be leveraged, and we're seeing that more and more people are demanding this. So if you can provide this, you can become a hub of information, a knowledge center for the organization. It's really going to help you A, achieve success, and B, get that project approved. Make sure that you're aligned with the CFO and other business unit leaders. We were encouraged that 92% of respondents said they need to improve their customer service skills, and that's important. Well, part of that is increasing the collaboration with the rest of the organization. Find out how AP can partner with other parts of the organization. What do they need? How can you help them do their job better? What information is AP sitting on that you can provide to business units, to the treasurers, to suppliers, to procurement to sourcing, partner with them. And as you partner with them, we'll find that AP perception gets increased significantly, and they're viewed as a much more critical component to the overall success of the organization, not just some back office function. And so it's critical that AP goes and talks to the rest of the organization and make sure it's in line with what the organization needs and wants, and that's critical. So I know I've kind of covered these a little bit quickly here. Daniel, wanted to bring you back on and see if you had anything to add here as we close this out.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it all, and maybe I just want to like kind of summarize it again by just repeating what you said, basically that the CFO needs to be credible. Whenever there's a question in the the executive management team meeting or in the board meeting, where do we stand with this? Where are we with this? What's this number? Everybody turns towards the CFO and expect them to have the answer. Now, with the situation we're in, that question is much sharper and comes much more often. Like I mentioned, they're expected to do new cash cash forecasts every week and present very accurate numbers. And how can they do that if you don't have the data and intelligence capabilities that you're talking about? And that data and intelligence is just nowhere if you have a paper-based process. So it all comes together with automating the process, getting all the information digitized, being able to forecast what's our cash requirement based on the invoices that are still in my workflow. I haven't, they're not even in my ERP or posted for payment, but I still have visibility into those based on the payment terms on those invoices. I can see when do I need to pay what amount and in what currency, and having this visibility across all your business units, regardless of how many different ERP systems you're running and regardless of how many countries you're in. That's the kind of control you need to be a good CFO today. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, then it's a different world, right? And those who have automated, they would never go back. I mean, we've had people getting a new job, working at one of our customer organizations, and then they get a new job in finance with another company and they haven't automated. And the first thing they do is to bring in our product because they can't even see themselves working in a manual process anymore when they've seen the light, so to say.
And kind of in closing, what you are tomorrow begins with what you do today. And so we need to really start, if you're in a paper-based process, there's no better time than right now to start looking at automating AP. This doesn't have to be a multi-year process. With the AP solutions that are out there, this is something that if you start today, you can start seeing the benefits, in weeks, or a matter of a couple of months. We're not talking years or quarters. This is something where the benefits can be seen immediately or almost immediately. And so, we encourage anybody out there with paper-based processes to start looking into this and to start making a plan to help automate and get rid of the inefficient processes that are going through the manual paper-based environments that are out there. And as this last slide shows here, if you're waiting for a sign, this is it. Now is the time to automate. So on the screen is our contact information. Wanted to thank everybody for spending a little time with us this afternoon. Hopefully you found the information worthwhile and insightful, and it was great communicating back and forth with Daniel. He's got a wealth of knowledge here, and so thank you for that, Daniel. And I will turn this back over to Meredith to close us out, but thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and look forward to speaking with you again in the future. And feel free to reach out to Daniel and I if you have any questions, or you want to receive this study. By all means, reach out to us. We're more than happy to provide it to you. And also, if you have any questions about, hey, how can we overcome our challenges that we face today, please reach out to us, because there is a better way. It'll make your life better.
Thank you, Bob, so much. Yes. As we've hit the end mark of our time today, I want to extend a huge thank you to our speakers for sharing their knowledge and experience with us at a time right now when we're all a bit unsure of what's ahead and are looking for some advice of what we can do to keep moving forward. Also, an equally big thank you to all of the attendees listening in right now. I know, unfortunately, we ran out of time for the Q&A, but don't fret. We'll be reaching out to you soon with more information to answer all of the questions that were asked. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, a link to the recording of today's webinar will be shared with all registrants, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. So thank you, everyone. We hope to speak with you again soon. Until then, stay safe, stay well.